Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Beatrix Neyman from Beatrix Designs. Here you will learn how to master Tunisian crochet and much more. If you don't want to miss anything, remember to subscribe and hit the bell, or you can visit my website at www.beatrixdesigns.co.za. Enjoy! Let's have a look today at the Tunisian full stitch, which is also known as the Goblin stitch or the mesh stitch, which you can see when I pull the fabric apart. It gives a mesh look, and that is where the name derives from. Now, this stitch is obtained by working a two-row repeat. That creates a checkered pattern and is especially striking when you work it in different colors. Like in the sample that I have here, I have two colors, and every repeat of the two rows that I alternate, there's a greenish or the mint color and the blue color, and you can see how they alternate. This pattern tends to be biased, and to prevent that, the two-row repeat is used where the beginning and the end is worked in using alternating staggered stitches. And you can see it here at the beginning. There's a blue stitch, and just staggering on it in a diagonal manner is every other color, and that is how this pattern is created. And I will demonstrate to you just now how to achieve the perfect Tunisian full stitch or goblin stitch pattern, which will not go bias, because that is what tends to happen with the stitch if you do not use these two rows that you need to alternate correctly. You might find that you might lose stitches, or your side will go in either inward or outward as you gain or lose stitches. The full stitch can be worked as part of a pattern, and in most cases it's used for increasing. Now, to work the stitch, you have to identify the space between the vertical bars. Here's your first stitch with a front and back vertical bar. There is the second stitch with a front and back vertical bar, and you will insert your hook in the space between those two stitches. Insert your hook, yarn over, and pull up a loop. Now, to work a stitch pattern, the beginning and the end will be worked alternating two rows of starting in the first space between the vertical bars. This will be my first row. We will continue working in the space between the V bars up to the second last space. The last space we will leave unworked. Now, I made this sample with 10 stitches. We have already 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 stitches. So working my last stitch Tunisian Simple Stitch wise will give me 10 stitches. The reason for skipping that last space is because I started in the first space. And working in the spaces, you will find that it influences your stitch count. So if I did the first row starting in the first space, but skipping my last space, I will complete my return pass as normal up to having my one loop on the hook, and then the second row I will skip that first space, but at the end I will come and I will work into the last space. So let's do that. Skip the first space. Instead of working it like in row 1, row 2, I will skip and start working in the second space. Yarn over, pull up a loop. I'm just going fast with this one because I'm sure that you understand where the placement of the hook should be, but I will give you the rules of the stitch, because if you do not alternate these two rows the way I explained to you now, you will find that familiar bias that happens when you are a beginner on this stitch pattern. Working my last stitch, Tunisian Simple Stitch wise. Again, I will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stitches because I skipped my first space. There it is. I skipped that space. I went to the second space, start my row on that, and then on the second last stitch I insert my hook in the last space, pull up a loop and work the last stitch Tunisian Simple Stitch wise as normal. Now if I put my fabric down like this, I want to explain to you what is happening. You will have a space between all those V-bars. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 spaces. But your last stitch you will work as normal for your Tunisian Simple Stitch. Your first stitch is already on the hook. So when I have a loop on the hook on my forward pass and I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 spaces, which I will work into, I will already have 10 stitches without working my last stitch. If I add that last stitch, working some simple stitch wise, it will add to 11 stitches. So for that reason, you can't work in the first space and in the last space on the same row. The other problem is starting in the same space the whole time with every row, skipping the last one, or the other way around. To keep your stitch count constant, your work will go bias as well. So that is why you have to alternate these two rows. By first choose to start in the first space, work right through, skipping the last space, working your last stitch to keep the stitch count equal. Then with your next row, you will skip your first space, but work in your last space and the last stitch to keep the stitch count equal. Return pass will be just as for your Tunisian Simple Stitch, and you will continue up to the last loop on the hook. And because I already worked one row, this was my second row, I will repeat the first row we're starting in my first space, skipping the last space, and then work my last stitch as normal for Tunisian Simple Stitch wise. Let me demonstrate here how to work this stitch pattern in two different colors. Now you can see here in the front, the one color makes a stacking line vertically, and at the back you can see what the stitch looks like. Working this manner in the front will give you the stripy appearance at the back. Now what I do here is that my color change I will do on the start of the forward pass. Now if you work a foundation row, you will start with one color on the foundation row. Then you will join your next color and you will just continue with the alternating stitch repeat as I explained. And in this instance, we can work the mint color as a foundation row. And what you will do is with your new color, you will join it on the last stitch with when you work your return pass. Now here I will just continue with this color. The next color that I will use or pick up, and that will be this blue or aqua color. And always do your color change by dropping your current color over the color that you will pick up to continue. And I will yarn over and pull up a loop, and there I'm ready to work my next row. Now you can see that I worked the mint. I started in my first space between these two blue stitches of the row before. So with this blue, I will skip my first space between the first and the second stitch. I will insert it into that second space and I will continue to complete the row. And this row I will obviously end by working in the last space before I finish off the last stitch. Another tip that I want to share with you on the Tunisian full stitch is this nice straight line that I have on my starting edge. Now let me show you, if I just get my little sample back here, what I mean about that. If you look at this sample, you can see that this edge here is not as nice and straight as my sample on the left side. Now that is due to the stitch that is worked in the first space. It pushes that very first stitch outward. Now I tried a few things, and what I found helpful that is only when I do the return pass on that alternating row where I worked in the first space, I just give my chain on the last stitch on the return a good tuck, and then I will continue working the next stitch in my second space. And by doing that, it helped make a nice straight edge on your starting edge of this Tunisian full stitch. Now let's just do the bind off on our Tunisian full stitch. Now instead of working the familiar slip stitch that I would use on a Tunisian Simple Stitch, for example, I prefer to work single crochet, which is US terminology. Working a single crochet helps this curl that the full stitch have, and it eliminates it slightly. Now I will do this bind off by starting to work the single crochet stitch exactly as I did for the pattern of this full stitch. I will start the next alternating row. So here I did the last stitch starting in the first space. So with a bind off my single crochet, I will start in the second space, and I will work the single crochet all the way down to the last, before the last space. But because I worked in the second stitch, or in the second space, I will finish in the last space and also complete by working in the last stitch. And there is the bind off. The top lies nice and flat, and I use this if I want to just finish the piece with a bind off. And that is all I have today for you on the Tunisian full stitch, also known as the Goblin stitch or the mesh stitch. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you found anything valuable, please share this with your crochet friends. Also, you can leave a comment if there's anything that you would like to see in the future. And remember to subscribe. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.